Among the most revealing yet under-discussed elements in the JonBenet Ramsey investigation is the repeated presence of fibers matching the red, gray, and black garment associated with Patsy Ramsey. These fibers were discovered in some of the most sensitive and crime-specific areas: on the duct tape covering JonBenet's mouth, in the cord used to fashion the ligature, embedded in the blanket that covered her body, and within the paint tray in the basement. And what makes this pattern particularly striking is that investigators reported no scientific basis for attributing those fibers to any source other than Patsy's outerwear. This point creates a forensic contradiction with her stated distance from the materials involved in her daughter's murder. Though Patsy's defense, Lynn Wood, argued that other unexplained fibers were present at the scene, we really don't get any details that were ever produced to clarify what those fibers were, let alone how they might relate to an alternate suspect. And so the lack of specificity in that rebuttal by Lynn Wood sort of weakens the weight of the counter argument. Moreover, there remains uncertainty around whether the item in question was a sweater, a jacket, or a coat, yet all references converge on a single article of clothing, no matter what it was. I don't care what it was. The convergence is the same. That whatever this was, it was composed of acrylic. It was a synthetic fiber known for its high propensity to shed, right? It was like a acrylic kind of wool is what it was. And so this only strengthens the significance of its repeated appearance across crime scene materials that Patsy claims not to have interacted with. And more fundamentally, these weren't generic fibers. The match that they got involved not just general color, but also the composition, the structure, and the consistency, down to a level of microscopic identification used by forensic scientists to tie clothing to crime scenes. Acrylic fibers, like those from Patsy's garment, can cling to textured surfaces through static transfer or casual brushing. But for that to happen across duct tape, ligatures, and blankets, and I think the duct tape was like some sort of different tape. It wasn't exactly duct tape. It was like boat tape or sailboat tape or something like that. That's what it was claimed. But anyways, in order for this to happen across things like the duct tape, the ligatures, and the blankets, there would need to be contact, direct or indirect, with all of those objects. And that's what makes the fiber evidence stand out. It offers a trail of physical presence where the suspect claims absence. And that contradiction certainly warrants a deeper confrontation with the facts. So let's jump right in. So I had specific questions about, the fibers from Patsy Ramsey's red, gray, and black coat or sweater found on JonBenet's body and at the crime scene. And so starting off with the fibers found in their locations. Fibers matching Patsy's red, gray, and black coat were reportedly found in several key locations associated with JonBenet's death. During Patsy Ramsey's interview with the Boulder Police Department, I think in April of 1997, and then later in August of 2000, I think, Mr. Levin, an interviewer, detective who was sort of working and questioning Patsy, sort of informed Patsy's attorney, Lynn Wood, that scientific evidence indicated that fibers from Patsy's red jacket were found in the following areas. They were found in the paint tray, tied to the ligature found on JonBenet. They were found on the blanket JonBenet was wrapped in, I think, when John found her and brought her upstairs, and on the duct tape, I'll just call it duct tape, found on the duct tape that was found on JonBenet's mouth. Now, Mr. Levin stated that he had no evidence from any scientist to suggest that these fibers came from any source other than Patsy's red jacket. However, Lynn Wood, Patsy's attorney, sort of challenged the certainty of these findings, suggesting that the fibers were merely consistent with or similar to those from Patsy's sweater or her jacket, rather than basically being able to say that they were an exact match. And Lynn Wood also pointed out that an extraordinary, and he said extraordinary number of other fibers not associated with Patsy Ramsey were found on these same items for which there was no explanation. And so, beyond sort of these specific items, I think when we're looking at some of the forensic reports specifically, they called it, or they titled it, I think, general hairs or fibers were submitted as evidence to the CBI for examination. CBI laboratory reports also list fibers from JonBenét's hand, I think, fibers from JonBenét's shirt, fibers from her pillow, or fibers from pillow. I can't say her pillow, but fibers from pillow. And I wish they would have done a better job kind of saying where this came from. I know, when you're closer to the case, it's easier to kind of know what you're talking about. But I wish, just for being thorough, they would have, said, okay, fibers from JonBenét's pillow, like they did. I wish they would have been consistent as they said fibers from JonBenét's hand. But anyways, among, exhibits submitted for analysis were these things: the hand, the shirt, and from the pillow, that were submitted for analysis. They also found, I believe, hair and fibers from the cellar. They found hair and fibers from another pillow were also collected. And so when we look at some of the police supplemental reports, I think one from December 27th of 96 mentions that during JonBenét's post-mortem examination, and this is where Linda Arndt came in, there were numerous traces of a dark fiber that were observed. And this is the case that we talked about when we were talking about John Ramsey's black fibers from his shirt that the police were questioning John about. John got very upset and called it BS. But anyways, moving on. So the coat or the sweater that Patsy was wearing, the sort of source material that I'm pulling from the interviews, the forensic reports, and things of that nature present sort of this conflicting narrative regarding whether Patsy Ramsey was wearing a coat or a sweater. It's hard to kind of get that down. And it's really weird as well, the way they describe it. Was it like all red, or was it somewhat red, or was it the majority red with a little bit of black and this and that? So that's kind of hard to get down. And so the exact description of the item is really tough to kind of narrow down. So in Patsy Ramsey's April 1997 interview, when an interviewer asked her about the coat, it kind of said, the coat that you wore the night to the White's house, to the Whites. Patsy confirmed its primary color is red. So I think that's what it is. It's just like, it has other colors, but it's primarily red. And so I think later in the same interview, the interviewer explicitly referred to it as the red, black, and gray coat. However, in John Ramsey's June of 1998 interview, when shown a photograph, he identified it as a multicolored item, as he called it multicolored. It was an item he identified it as a sweater of Patsy's, and stated he was pretty sure that's Patsy's sweater, which sort of was depicted on JonBenét's bed. And so be interesting to kind of go back and look at those pictures just to kind of see and tell. And so additionally, a police supplemental report for December 26, 1996 states that an officer last saw Patsy Ramsey wearing black pants and a red turtleneck sweater. So we kind of get a broad sense. If the police officer is saying, okay, yes, it's red, or red, yes, there might be multicolors, but if Patsy was wearing on the day that they found JonBenet the same thing that she was wearing the day before, then we can kind of be certain and that there's a consistency here that, okay, the primary color, as Patsy stated, is red. Okay, so this does suggest that while Patsy was questioned about a red, black, and gray coat, and John identified it as a multicolored sweater, possibly on JonBenét's bed, an officer of the scene observed her in a red turtleneck sweater. So it's kind of just trying to make sure that we're referring to the same thing here, because when you talk about some of these things, you have to get it down to the exact thing. Are we talking about the same thing? Because what I don't want to hear is, oh, that was a different sweater. She actually did get up and put on a different sweater the next day. And so that sweater, there's a clear difference. This sweater was red, and this other sweater was multicolored. No. Are we talking about the same thing? Can we say that the primary color of the sweater was red so that if somebody were to see it, they can say, oh, she was wearing a red sweater? But if somebody wants to be specific and say, oh, she was wearing a red sweater, but there were sort of like black rectangles at the bottom of this, black and gray rectangles at the bottom of the sweater. Well, I mean, dang, the primary color is red. Okay. So you just, in these cases, you don't want people to be able to weasel out of it, I guess is what I'm saying. So anyways, dealing with the fact whether she claimed to have worn this. So Patsy Ramsey didn't explicitly claim to have worn something red, black, and gray, I believe, on the night of December 25th, in what I can tell. However, when she was questioned, and we can nail this down, however, when she was questioned about the coat, where the phrase was the coat that you wore the night to the Whites, which implies that she was believed to have worn it that evening. She stated that this coat was hanging in her closet in Atlanta, and I think she was kind of talking in 1998 or something like that. She said that it was hanging in a closet in Atlanta when it was requested by lawyers. And so, anyways, approximately like a year after her daughter, like maybe a year or two after her daughter's murder. And so she said she couldn't recall by the time they asked for it. She said by the time the investigators asked for it, and John kind of said the same thing. We had to see pictures to know what you guys were asking for. We had to see pictures of those because we couldn't remember. And I was like, man, that's kind of an important thing that I feel like people would know. And I'm not going to press the issue, but I feel like it's kind of an important thing people would know. Like, man, this was what was going on the day that this person that was close to me, something happened to them. And I remember where I was. I remember what I was doing. Now, I will give you this. You probably more so remember what happened in most cases rather than remembering exactly what you wore. So I respect that. If they said, hey, let us know what we were wearing, because I can't really remember what we were wearing. That's fine. I have no qualms against that. No, I'm not going to quarrel with that issue. But anyways, Patsy said, I think it was hanging in my closet. They were living in Atlanta at the time. By the time it was requested, she said it was hanging in my closet. She could not recall if she continued to wear it during that year or if it had been dry cleaned. And she also indicated that she would not wear this particular coat for painting, doing things like painting and things that were kind of laborious and things of that nature. As mentioned, or what I'm calling laborious, as mentioned, an officer observed her wearing a red turtleneck sweater on December 26th of 1996. And so this is my issue thus far. This is my issue. We have Patsy Ramsey sort of stating that she would not wear this particular coat or sweater for painting. That gives the impression that this coat, to me, that this coat or sweater was too nice to be worn for anything laborious. It suggests that she considered it part of her good clothes. And perhaps she reserved this for special occasions like Fleet and Priscilla's Christmas party, things like that. And so this idea, to me, definitely aligns with the possibility that John, too, was wearing his good clothes to the party. In other words, these were not outfits one would expect to wear if there was going to be a lot of physical activity, or, more critically, if a crime were going to be committed. These clothes are too good for that, right? If you're going to commit a crime, you're not going to dress up in clothes that you would wear to the Met Gala or a gala in general. You wouldn't wear those clothes. And so when we go to start working again on these fibers and understanding these fibers, the criminal, this intruder, we would have to believe that they were not wearing traditional clothing for a crime, which would suggest to us that this person maybe one did leave fibers. We thought they didn't, but apparently they did if they were wearing these kinds of clothes, but we just didn't recognize them or attribute them to the criminal. Or this person really just doesn't respect, maybe they, well, okay, second thing, the person doesn't really respect nice clothes or clothes that you're not supposed to, or they don't know good criminal clothing etiquette. I guess is what we're dealing with. They don't know the good clothes. They just don't care. The third thing I was going to say is that, it was Christmas Day. They had things to do. Hey, honey, we got some gifts to drop off, and we're going to do that today. We're going to get up. It's Christmas Day. We're going to celebrate with the kids. We are going to go find some place to eat dinner if you haven't already cooked, or we're going to make dinner. And later on, you and I have got a crime to commit. And so I don't think I need any all black clothes and a ski mask. I think that, or things that would stop me from being found out at a crime scene. You know what? We're just going to go in what we have on. That's what we're going to do. We're going to wear this. I'm going to go out here in my Christmas sweater and my slacks. That's what I'm going to do, and my nice loafers. That's what I'm going to do. This is the criminal that we're talking about. You've got to be kidding me. So that's exactly, to me, why the presence of these fibers, why these fibers are so noteworthy to me. They're not supposed to be there. As we discussed in our previous analysis regarding John's black sweater fibers, there are two main issues. First, are we really to believe that the intruder or the intruders somehow managed to wear clothing that closely matched what both John and Patsy were wearing that day? That level of detail, down to the fiber composition and color, would require them to be exceptionally familiar with the Ramseys' wardrobe and their habits. Exceptionally familiar. We're not, somebody tracked us, like the ransom note said. Oh, they knew our every move. They tracked us, this, that, and the third. No, I'm talking about somebody. We're not just tracking movements here. We're trying to copy you. Right? So this is somebody who is exceptionally familiar with the Ramseys' wardrobe and their habits. It stretches credibility in this case then to suggest they just happen to wear something so similar that their fibers would be indistinguishable from John and Patsy's, especially when those fibers were found in some of the most critical locations at the crime scene. And second, there's this pattern, almost a mirroring, where both John and Patsy were wearing sweaters. It may not be the most important point here, I can see that. But it's a curious one. We've seen photos of Patsy coordinating outfits for the family during Christmas time. And there's evidence suggesting that she and JonBenet even discussed matching outfits for the Christmas party that evening. So in that context, it's not surprising that John and Patsy both ended up in sweaters of some sort. John in a simple black sweater, simple black one, as might suit his more reserved, straightforward personality, and Patsy in something more expressive, shades of black, but with added flair. It's, to me, reflective of who they were. John, the more stoic figure, chose a sweater that was clean and minimalist. Patsy, on the other hand, is vivacious, colorful, energetic. She chose a sweater that was unique and expressive while still coordinating with John in some way with the black. So you can almost picture her arriving at the Christmas party with sort of this look of sheer joy, wearing that sweater with pride and personality. Okay, so that's a minor point, but something in terms of understanding the festivities of that night and sort of the personality, digging deep into the personality. What kind of people are we looking at here? What kind of people are we talking about here? Getting in the mind. I don't want to say getting in the mind of a criminal, right? I just want to say getting in the mind of an individual. Okay. So my next set of questions around this sort of red sweater fiber thing were, I think I had several of them. One question was, do we know the texture and consistency of the jacket that Patsy Ramsey was wearing? Do we know more about it? Do we know the manufacturer or the brand of the jacket? Is another question. Another question is there any information on what material sort of the jacket was made from? Trying to get down to the nitty gritty. Do we know how much the jacket costs or costed at the time? Right? Was there any unique identifiers of the jacket that would distinguish it from other jackets, such as something that may have been premium fabric or a distinctive design or a rare material? Do we have that? And then another question I had was, when Patsy Ramsey's attorney objected and mentioned that there were an extraordinary number of fibers not associated with Patsy Ramsey found on the same items, do we know exactly what types of fibers he was referring to? Was he referring to things such as dog hairs or fibers from other clothing or other materials? That much is not clear to me. And so kind of walking down this, dealing with first with the texture and consistency of the jacket that Patsy was wearing. So the material doesn't specifically, the interviews and things of that nature don't specifically provide a detailed description of the exact texture of or consistency of the red, gray, and black coat Patsy Ramsey was wearing, such as, oh, it's soft, it's rough, or it's smooth. However, some of the clues about its general nature, Patsy refers to it as kind of a little jacket or a coat. And she also refers to it as something you put on to go outside in the cold. And so when discussing its cleaning, Patsy initially thought it might be primarily wool. But then I think she came back and clarified that she said, I'm not sure about that. I think it's able to be thrown in a washing machine, which was kind of interesting to me because she said earlier that she didn't know if she had dry cleaned it. But now she's talking about, well, no, I don't need to dry clean it. I can just simply throw it in the washing machine. And it's kind of a little jacket, something that you just put on when it's cold outside. So what kind of thing is this? Is this something, because dry cleaning to me is sort of an elevated form of washing your clothes, right? You're not just going to take everything to the dry cleaners. So my dad used to be at the dry cleaners every single week when he was taking his suits to the dry cleaners all the time. And it was a really big thing for him. Sometimes I would have friends who would take, when they wanted their pants starched a certain way, their jeans or their khakis, or not khakis, but their slacks starched a certain way and to look a certain way with a certain press, they would take it to the cleaners. Later on, we found what kind of starch the cleaners were using and just kind of used it for ourselves. But when you wanted to do sort of like that high end stuff, and I'm not saying the cleaners are high end or stuff like that, whatever. What I'm saying is to go through the trouble. There's a different level of going through the trouble. And, if the cleaners are not on the way for us, for me, the cleaners were sort of 15 minutes down the street. So you get your clothes together and then you take them down there. And you don't do it all the time. Most of the time, you just throw it in the washing machine. And so, but there are certain clothes that, to me, you would set back and have those for the cleaners. Those wouldn't be thrown in the washing machine, right? And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm sort of confused. It's not really that big of a deal, but I'm sort of confused as to, first, this is material that we're taking to the dry cleaner, or having it dry cleaned a couple of times. Now we're moving into the fact that I'm not sure if I threw it in the washing machine or not. That's just a little confusing to me. But anyways, an interviewer, Mike Kane, stated, he said, I believe it was made of acrylic. which Mr. Levin then affirmed as it was acrylic. Acrylic is a synthetic fiber often used to simulate wool, uh, which suggests it. So yeah, because he said it was sort of like acrylic. And so when we think about acrylic, in and of itself, like I said, it's a synthetic fiber often used to simulate wool, I think, from what I understand, which suggests it likely had a soft or somewhat bulky consistency. Um, Looking at the second question, then, uh, the brand and the manufacturer, what it's made of, and maybe the cost. And so the manufacturer of the brand, Patsy Ramsey recalled that her friend, talking about Priscilla White, um, had a similar coat that she admired. And Priscilla told her she got hers at EMS, I think. I don't know what EMS. And so I think Patsy said she went to EMS to look for one, but either they didn't have one or she didn't want one that looked exactly like Priscilla's. And so Patsy goes on to say that she believes she ultimately purchased her red, gray, and black coat at Marshall's in Boulder. Okay. And so that's as much as we know. So in terms of the material, as mentioned above, it's identified by the interviewers as kind of being made of acrylic. And Patsy, I think, initially thought it might be wool, but then thought it was washable. And so in terms of the cost, we don't really get any information in terms of the cost. So none of the sources say, okay, this might have costed this much. I wish they would have asked John and Patsy about how much do you think you paid for it. And obviously at the time, that is probably not important. But I just wish that was asked, at the time. And so the third thing we were talking about was sort of like unique identifiers of the jacket. So other than its distinctive color pattern, red, black, and gray, or a red and black jacket, the we don't get any more, specific, unique identifiers, such as whether it was like this premium quality material or a special designed feature or something like that, or it had any unique markings that would sort of help us separate it from any other similar coat, right? Any other acrylic, wool fiber, acrylic fiber coat, right? So Patsy stated it was not, like a special Christmassy type, is what she said, or a type of Christmas sweater, right? So it's not really specific to Christmas, like she just said. It's something that you throw on when it's cold. And apparently, while the red might remind you of Christmas and where she was going, the Christmas festivities might remind you of that. This is not specifically a Christmas sweater or something that is very Christmassy driven. And so she also confirmed that she would not wear this coat for painting. Okay. Um, in terms of the fibers not associated with Patsy that were found on the same item, Linwood's claim, Patsy Ramsey's attorney here strongly emphasized the presence of other fibers when challenging the certainty of the fiber evidence attributed to Patsy's coat. And Mr. Levin informed Linwood and Patsy that forensic scientists had provided scientific evidence that fibers matching Patsy's red jacket were found in the paint tray tied to the ligature on JonBenet and on the blanket that she was wrapped in and on the duct tape. And he stated that he had no evidence from any scientists to suggest that these fibers came from any other source. So in response, though, Linwood goes on to say, I think we will also find, if you put all of the information out there, that there were an extraordinary number of other fibers that are not, in fact, in any way similar to any item associated with Patsy Ramsey on these very items. And so he argued that to single out Patsy's fibers, so his argument is that to single out Patsy's fibers without revealing the, the extraordinary number of other fibers would create an unfair record. Same thing as he said with John. That's his go-to. However, the material does not specifically detail what types of extraordinary number of other fibers were found. And so Linwood refers to them generally as other fibers or fibers that are not, in fact, in any way similar to any items associated with Patsy Ramsey. And he does not specify if they were dog hairs or any other thing. The CBI laboratory report lists heron, as we talked about, lists heron or fibers as general exhibits collected for the examination, and the autopsy report notes, or the police report from Linda Arndt, or the search warrant reports the numerous dark fibers that were found on her, but the specific nature of these other fibers mentioned by Linwood is not elaborated on in the provided interviews and stuff like that. And so I guess my point, my initial thought on this back and forth exchange um, is this. We are beginning to notice a pattern, and I would say a rather disturbing pattern, one where fibers linked to John and Patsy continue to show up in various places, or fibers that could be linked to John and Patsy show up in various places around the crime scene. And to me, this raises serious questions about presence and proximity, especially when cross-referenced with the family's own statements. And so my core argument is, even if we were to discover, as Linwood is suggesting, even if we were to discover additional fibers not linked to the Ramseys, okay? To me, that wouldn't necessarily weaken the central issue that I'm having here. The real concern isn't whether or not other fibers existed or not. To me, it's that we keep finding their fibers, or fibers similar to theirs, in places they said, oh, I wasn't there, I wasn't near it, I didn't touch it, or I had no reason to be connected to that, based on what they're telling us, based on their version of events. And so this kind of contradiction to me certainly demands more of our full attention. Because why would something that can be connected to you even be remotely close to the crime scene, or found in the area, in all of the areas where this murder happened? That should not ever be the case to me. It doesn't make sense. And these aren't just vague textile types. We're not dealing with something like, oh, here's a cotton fiber, or in half the world, wears cotton, right? We're not dealing with that. These are specific fibers tied to precise garments. We're talking about, in John's case, a black wool coat or jacket or sweater, whatever you want to call it. A black wool coat, black wool fibers that came from an item, an article of clothing made in Israel. So now we got to go find that type of wool in the United States or somewhere else. But that shouldn't have even matched. Or in Patsy's case, we are talking about synthetic acrylic wool consistent with a particular item, an item, not just a bunch of items, but the item. Like, look, we can go through your whole closet and be like, oh, it does match, doesn't match, does match, doesn't match. But why does it match the specific thing that you were wearing that night, both of you? Why in our analysis, in our forensic scientific analysis, would these two articles of clothing that you gave us, and I gotta be more specific, like we said before, John gave two articles of clothing, but it didn't match this. We talk about the sort of the ability to isolate the isolation between two items. We can isolate the specific connection. John gave two articles of clothing, and when they tested, it only matched one, and it didn't match the one that he didn't wear that night. It it matched the one that he happened to wear. What are the odds? How did that happen? And then the same thing for Patsy. Well, she didn't give us two, I don't think. She just gave us the one. She was a little bit more specific about which garment she gave. And the very one that she gave us was a match to everything found on the crime scene. We're talking about fibers that not only match the material type, but also match the color, huh? The color, the weave, and the composition, down to a near exact microscopic profile. So that's not generic. That's targeted. The Ramseys are saying, oh, that, it's just because what is happening is a bunch of these so-called coincidences are being called just that. These so-called happenstances are being called just that. Oh, that's just a coincidence. It just happened to be the case. There are so many happen to be the case. There are so many of these things that are starting to pop up for me that it's getting kind of ridiculous. And like I said before, once you begin to look at the preponderance of evidence that is starting to mount to say, well, wait a minute. I get it. Let's start off with the intruder. I get all that. I understand. But how is this intruder able to mimic you so well? Mimicking the fingerprints and the touch DNA and the clothing. Mimicking your patterns of moving around the house. How? This person is literally two, and not because we're not talking about one person. We're talking about two people that were literally able to get inside the mind of John and Patsy Ramsey and someone going out of their way to replicate the Ramseys' exact color, clothing color, fabric, fiber type. And then we're really just left with just one conclusion. The fibers are yours. These belong to you. The only other alternative is deliberate mimicry. Somebody has to be deliberately mimicking you. And that is so, to me, that is so improbable in this case. It's so improbable because, as I was going to say before, we're all the way down to whoever this was almost getting the handwriting of Patsy down very close to where when investigators look at this stuff, because investigators are not just looking and saying, hey, this intruder had this, or, oh, can you take a lie detector test? If you don't take a lie detector test, we don't believe you, and that means you're guilty. Investigators are not just saying that. What investigators are looking and having to say is that, my goodness, these people were extremely similar to you. I mean, they were almost your shadow. They were like you. And from there, we have to go back to the ransom note that said they had a vendetta against John. Because the first ransom note would seem more applicable to me. It would have to. That first ransom note would be more applicable to me, because when they try to start off Mr. and Miss Ramsey, because of the similarities, because they went above and beyond not to copy John, but they went above and beyond to copy Patsy. So there is a target at wanting to be Patsy here. There is a target at wanting to be John here. But if there is a target at somebody wanting to be John and a target at somebody wanting to be Patsy specifically, down to the nose, down to the garments that they were wearing on Christmas, this is psychopathic behavior. If this is an intruder, this is psychopathic behavior. Because they know you so well, down to what you're going to wear tomorrow? That's what you're telling me? I don't know, man. That's kind of questionable. So what Lynn Wood is trying to do, quite transparently, I might say, as you may know, is deflect. He raises this hypothetical that if other items had been tested, we might find fibers from other sources. But to me, that's a little bit of a misdirection. That's speculation that's wrapped in sort of this distraction. The issue is not what could be found, but we're dealing with what has been found. And what has been found is a consistent pattern of evidence seemingly directly linked to the Ramseys' clothing, and linking that pattern of evidence to physical items and locations in the crime scene. Fibers matching. Let's be clear, fibers matching Patsy's jacket found on the duct tape. My goodness. Black fibers consisted with John's shirt found on the blanket. And, in sensitive areas. That is more disturbing. That the black fibers are found inside of the long johns. But I might say equally as disturbing are the red fibers found inside of the duct tape, found in other areas. And we'll talk about this more. The ligature, that's lightly on the outside, on the sheet and in other places on JonBenet. That's disturbing. So on. All of these things, you combine that with the presence of family fingerprints on the pineapple bowl, the tea glass, and now you're looking at a scene that is sort of saturated with familiar DNA and fiber evidence, but noticeably absent of anything meaningfully foreign. So I see a bunch of familiar DNA out there. I can't find any foreign DNA here. And any foreign DNA I find, it's very minimal. Think about that for a second, because that's what we're holding on to. We are holding on to DNA that is very minimal from a foreign intruder. But somehow, some way, the DNA of of Burke and Patsy sort of abounds in those critical areas, according to the forensic reports. The fibers, according to police reports and the autopsy report, abound that can be matched to the Ramseys. That should not be in the least bit, because it's like if I can liken it to this. It's like there's trouble in some place, and um, at the same time, or there's trouble brewing in some place, and say you have a kid, say you have a kid, and they said, "I'm going to the store," and you say, "Okay." You walk to the store. It's right up the street. You walk to the store. You get you a Snickers bar, and you come right back. Okay? You get you a Snickers and a Coke, and you come right back. I don't want to. I don't want to hear nothing else. I'm telling you right now. I don't want to hear nothing else. I don't want to hear. Oh, but I just tried to. I wanted to. I don't want to hear none of that. You take your behind down there and get the snack that you told me you're gonna get, and you come right back here. It should take you 30 minutes because it don't take you long to get down to that store. It takes you 5 minutes, and I'm gonna sit here and watch you. It takes you 5 minutes to get down to that store and 5 minutes to get back. It don't take you all day to get a Snickers bar. You go down there and you get that Snickers bar and you come back. I should see you. It's 10 o'clock right now. It's 10 a.m. right now. I should see you back no later than 10:30. And if you're back later than 10:30, it's gonna be me and you. It gets 10:45 and you're at 10:45 and your kid is running back to the house, and then the police show up and they say, "Oh, we've had sort of a disturbance where your child was a witness down at Costco," and you're like, Costco. I told you to go down to the Chevron station. Costco is a 10-minute walk beyond the Chevron station. How did you get down to Costco? Oh, no, we just, she's not in any trouble, and we just want to just ask her what she saw. Okay, yeah, talk to her. But my question after that is, why were you even at Costco? I understand that whatever happened at Costco had nothing to do with you. I get all that. But my question is, how would you even be a witness to what happened at Costco unless you were at Costco? How would your fibers or your DNA show up at a crime scene when you were up in bed? I'm confused. Especially if you don't go down there. Now, Patsy, I can see. Again, I would give Patsy a pass on being down in the basement because she was supposedly wrapping Christmas gifts down there. But John telling me that he never really went down there. Why? But you know what? You know what? John was probably down there, and I'm gonna tell you why. A little clue in one of the next episodes. I'm gonna tell you why. We're gonna deal with John in these cigars. But John may have been down in that basement the morning of Christmas, at least around or noontime. He may have been in that basement. Okay? And that might give him an out. But anyways, he may have been in that basement. But no. Not an out in terms of what we found in the Long Johns. Because he said he didn't dress JonBenet. But he may have been in that basement. Or whatever. And so, but anyways, getting back to my original point, this is where it all becomes critical to call out the logic. Because we're saying, like I just said, even if additional fibers had been found from other sources, unless those fibers are directly linked to credible alternative suspects, they don't carry the same weight. They don't change the fundamental contradiction that we're dealing with. The fact that we keep finding the Ramsey fibers, and in places they either denied being near or shouldn't have been near in their timeline, if their timeline is accurate, is not something that you can just water down just because a few other materials show up too. And so when we look at this, we're talking about the weight of the physical consistency, the fibers, the prints, and the touch DNA. It all rests overwhelmingly seemingly in their direction. So the suggestion that we should be distracted by hypothetical alternatives is not only weak, it's irresponsible, because you should probably go do your, I mean, my God, you guys are, you guys have your own team. Go do your own testing. You know what I mean? And so the sweater in question, being a wool acrylic blend, likely similar to, and I had a picture that I was looking to. It's called like APT.9. .9. It's like a brand. And I was looking it up to try to understand. That example sort of like featured a lightweight, and I found it on eBay. Featured like a lightweight, loosely woven knit that is particularly prone to fiber shedding, because that's what I was looking for. And acrylic is a synthetic fiber designed to mimic wool, but it lacks the natural cohesion, I think, in what they might call lanolin that wool possesses. So making it more susceptible to fraying or shedding, I think, especially when brushed against other surfaces. Okay, so the addition of wool to the blend can add warmth and structure, but doesn't eliminate the shedding tendency, right? Especially in garments that are not tightly woven. Okay, sweaters like this, I think, are known to release fibers through everyday friction, such as sitting on upholstered furniture, hugging someone, putting on or taking off a coat, or resting your arm on a fabric-covered surface. Static electricity in dry environments can also be an issue, which is kind of like Colorado's winter climate, I think. These things can exacerbate this shedding by, sort of helping fibers cling to other objects. Furthermore, if we're looking at this, if Patsy had worn this sweater while handling objects later linked to the crime scene, such as the duct tape, the blanket, the paint tray, those materials could have easily picked up fibers through a simple touch, through her just simply leaning over or sort of brushing past it. Even folding or draping the sweater could dislodge small acrylic fibers, especially if the garment was a little older, worn frequently, or had been machine washed, which tends to loosen fibers at the microscopic level. So overall, this type of material is highly transferable under minimal physical interaction, making the presence of matching fibers at key locations a significant forensic marker, because this is something that you cannot hide. This is something that just, it happens. So what I'm seeing is sort of this disturbing pattern. You have fibers that match the red, the gray, and the black acrylic garment Patsy Ramsey was wearing that keep showing up in the most critical locations tied to JonBenet's murder. The duct tape on her mouth, the ligature, the blanket that was wrapped around her, and even the paint tray in the basement. And so investigators in this case made it clear that there's no scientific evidence pointing to any other source for those fibers other than Patsy's jacket or sweater. Meanwhile, Lynn Wood is trying to cast doubt by saying that there were extraordinary numbers of other fibers not tied to Patsy, but never was able to kind of give us details. There's no examples. And so to me, that sounds more like deflection rather than fact, right? And so what makes this more complicated is that even the exact item that Patsy was wearing isn't perfectly pinned down. Some call it a coat, others call it a sweater, and a police report describes it as a red turtleneck. John Ramsey calls it a multicolored item that he said was Patsy's, and still Patsy said, I wouldn't wear this garment if I was painting, which tells me that it wasn't some sort of beat up lounge piece. It was part of her good clothes to me, right? And it doesn't just have to be really good clothes, like, oh, this is the best, like fine china. But this is not something that I'm just going to wear to get beat up. This is a nice piece. It's a pretty nice piece. It's a pretty nice jacket that, I like to wear it. I like to wear it regularly. It's something that I can, dress it up. And so it lines up with the idea that I'm trying to go to like a Christmas party. I can wear it to a Christmas party, because you wouldn't wear like this tattered, ugly looking shirt that you wear to fix the car to the Christmas party. You wouldn't do that. And so I don't think that's what Patsy did. This is a pretty good, sweater, which lines up with the idea that John wears this nice wool sweater made in Israel that night. And so what really drives this home for me is the material that we're dealing with, this specific material. The item was made of acrylic, which, this synthetic fiber is mimicking the wool, but more fragile when it comes to shedding, right? Patsy wouldn't be thinking about this. She wouldn't know this. She would know that this is shedding. If she's moving around a crime scene, she wouldn't, because these are not things, and this is a very rookie mistake. If the intruders were as good as we're giving them credit for being in this SWAT operation that they conducted, right? If they're as good as we think they are, then they would be wearing clothes that would not shed a bunch of fibers. Definitely not the amount of fibers that are coming from a garment like Patsy. I mean, for what? Why would you wear that? And so, those kinds of fibers being around the crime scene would suggest that whoever was moving around this crime scene was really a rookie in committing crimes, or a rookie in handling a crime scene. Because one of the biggest things when you're on a crime scene and you're involved in or in the midst of the crime scene, you don't want to drop a bunch of your fibers and stuff like that. You don't want a bunch of your clothing to riddle the crime scene with your fibers or anything like that, or your DNA. You don't want that. That's why detectives and a lot of times and specialists are wearing gloves, because they're saying, you know what, I don't want to mess up this crime scene with my DNA. That confuses the crime scene. And so the fact that we see a lot of this loose knit acrylic that can shed a lot, especially in dry air or when rubbed against other surfaces, just as simple as hugging someone, sitting on furniture, touching a blanket, those fibers are behind. So if Patsy wore that sweater and got anywhere near the crime scene materials, it would have taken almost no effort for those fibers to transfer. And they did. We don't know if Patsy was by the crime scene according to what is being witnessed and what they're saying. But for some strange and odd reason, her information, her fibers showed up. Fibers that are easily transferable. But here's the problem for me. If you're not near those things, but yet your fibers are there again and again, and again, these are not generic cotton fibers anyone could have left behind. They match very specific materials right down to the color and the weave and the structure. That's not a coincidence. The only way someone else could have left those same fibers is if they were somehow wearing the exact same kind of clothing. And to me, with the preponderance of everything else, that's not plausible. Even if we need to start dealing with probabilities, this is not probable at all. Even if other fibers were found, unless they're linked to someone else in a meaningful way, they don't undo the weight of what is linked to the Ramseys, the touch DNA, the fingerprints, the fibers. To sort of conclude here, when reviewing the fiber evidence in totality, I think the conclusion becomes increasingly difficult to avoid. Fibers from Patsy Ramsey's clothing are located at almost every pivotal point in the crime scene, including the body of JonBenet. And this just cannot be explained away as an incidental or accidental thing. These fibers are consistent in color, texture, and chemical structure with the very article she was believed to have worn the night of the Christmas party. And the fact that these garments were categorized, I think, as sort of good clothes, unsuitable for, or I'm categorizing them as good clothes, unsuitable for messy or laborious tasks, sort of underscores the improbability that they would have naturally ended up on such objects unless there had been sort of this close physical contact under suspicious circumstances. And so attempts to discredit this evidence by invoking the presence of unidentified fibers from unknown sources collapses under scrutiny. For a fiber to challenge the Ramsey's connection, it would have to do more than merely exist. It would need to be meaningfully linked to a credible alternate suspect. And so that threshold, with Linwood just jumping up there and saying anything, that threshold was never met. Meanwhile, the fibers from Patsy's garment turn up in places that align closely with the acts of restraint, concealment, and post-mortem handling. Right? Garments similar, let's just say fibers similar to Patsy's garment, tend to show up in these places. So the specificity of the match and the breadth of their distribution carry more forensic weight to me than any hypothetical distractions raised by Linwood. And so what we're left with is a highly transferable material, acrylic, that behaves exactly as science predicts. It sheds easily, it clings persistently, and it marks the scene with a physical record of presence. Yet, the Ramseys repeatedly insisted that they had no contact with these items in the moments surrounding JonBenét's death. So that contradiction between forensic fact and sort of this testimonial narrative that we go through, when we look at what the Ramseys are telling us, to me is not minor. I think it's pretty structural. And unless you're one that believes that an intruder somehow dressed themselves in a near identical Ramsey garment to commit the crime, I think you start to go toward a specific conclusion. And it's one that is rooted in proximity, probability, and sort of the physical truth of the matter. But anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Let me know what you think in the comments. And hope you're taking care of yourself. And until next time, take it easy.